America is at a tipping point, literally. We tip baristas, bartenders, drivers, valets, delivery folks. It's a dance we all know well. But here's the kicker. Tipping wasn't always the American way. In fact, it was once considered downright un-American. So how did we go from rejecting tips to handing them out like confetti? And how did the government rewrite the rules in 2025? We're pulling back the curtain on the dark, twisted history of tipping in America and today's consumer pushback. A story of class, race, corporate greed, and a custom that's way more sinister than you think. What is tipping, and why does it feel so weird? You're at your favorite cafe and you order a muffin and a coffee. The total, $5. But then the screen flips around, staring at you with those big, flashy buttons, 15%, 20%, 25%. And then you feel it, that weird pressure in your chest. Do you tip for a muffin? What's the right thing to do? We've all been there. By one estimate, Americans hand over more than $42 billion in tips every year at full-service restaurants alone. That's more than the entire economy of a country like Iceland. Just handed over in small, awkward, often guilt-laced transactions. But here's the strange part. Tipping is one of the few things in American life that feels mandatory, yet no one seems to know exactly how it works. Is it a gift, a reward, a bribe, an unspoken social contract, or just a Band-Aid covering up a broken system? Think about it. You tip your server at a restaurant, your bartender, your rideshare driver, your barista at the coffee shop. But you don't tip your doctor or dentist. You don't slip the cashier at Walmart a $20 for scanning your order extra fast. And you certainly don't Venmo your Amazon delivery guy for dropping off your late-night impulse buys. So why do we tip some workers and not others? And why does it feel so, awkward? And what about that dreaded tip screen, the one that flips around blinking at you while the cashier pretends not to watch? But maybe you've been on the other side, working late nights for gratuities that make the difference between rent and eviction. The big lie is that tipping is just about rewarding good service. But scratch the surface, and it's about something deeper. A cultural ritual built on a shaky foundation of social pressure, guilt, and a convenient loophole for employers to pay less than the minimum wage. It's a system that makes workers depend on the kindness or mood of strangers, and it's become so normalized that we rarely question it. But at one time, Americans did question it. So how did we get here? To understand why you're leaving that 20% tip, we need to rewind a few centuries, back to when tipping was just a flex for the European elite. The European origins, the aristocratic flex. Back in medieval Europe, a tip wasn't a polite thank you, it was a statement of power. Imagine the candle-lit halls of a sprawling manor house. A lord tosses a coin to a footman, not because the footman did something extra, but to remind everyone watching exactly who's in charge. Tipping was a sign that the wealthy could afford to scatter a little gold to keep their underlings loyal, or at least quiet. By the 17th and 18th centuries, tipping was woven into the fabric of European aristocracy. Nobles tipped their servants and coachmen. Wealthy travelers handed coins to porters and innkeepers. Even in the smoky pubs of Victorian London, the practice spread. It was less about rewarding a job well done and more about reminding the poor where they stood. But here's the twist. While tipping was common for centuries in Europe, not everyone adored it. In fact, some saw it as corrupt, a sneaky way to get what you wanted by paying extra under the table. The working class resented how tips made them dependent on the whims of the rich, and the wealthy liked it because, they stayed in control. So why did Americans, a nation founded on the idea of freedom from old world class systems, end up tipping even more than the Europeans who invented it? The answer is as ironic as it is infuriating. Because when tipping arrived in America, it didn't just recreate old social hierarchies, it created brand new ones. And some were even darker than the lords and peasants of Europe could have imagined. Tipping comes to America, and Americans hate it. When tipping made its grand debut on American soil, it wasn't welcomed with open arms. Quite the opposite, it was a scandal. In the late 1800s, wealthy Americans returning from grand tours of Europe wanted to show off their newfound sophistication. They'd come back bragging about fancy Parisian cafes and English country inns. And naturally, they brought the tipping habit home with them. But regular Americans, they were not impressed. Many saw tipping as an insult to the nation's ideals of democracy and equality. After all, America had fought a revolution to get away from European aristocracy and its rigid class system. In the early 1900s, anti-tipping sentiment was so strong that entire grassroots movements sprang up to abolish the practice. People joined groups like the Anti-Tipping Society of America, founded in 1904. Newspaper headlines screamed, "Tipping is un-American," and editorials railed against the practice. By some counts, as many as 7 states actually banned tipping altogether between 1909 and the mid-1910s. But big business had other ideas. Powerful restaurant owners and railroad tycoons saw a golden opportunity. By embracing tipping, they found a loophole around paying their workers a fair wage. Why pay your staff a living wage when you could shift that burden onto the customer instead? The practice spread like wildfire through the booming hospitality industry. It was the perfect con. Sell the idea that tipping was about generosity, while behind the scenes, businesses slashed their payroll expenses. Meanwhile, the workers were left in the same vulnerable position, dependent on the whims of whoever sat at their table or rode in their train car. So how did this loophole become so entrenched? To find out, we need to follow the money and the racial history to a time when an entire workforce was told they'd have to live off tips or not live at all. The race factor and labor exploitation. After the Civil War, millions of Black Americans were technically free, but freedom didn't come with fair pay. Powerful industries needed a way to keep labor costs rock bottom in a world where slavery was no longer legal. Enter the tip. Railroads led the way. The Pullman Company, once one of the nation's largest employers of Black workers, hired thousands of Black men as porters. They carried luggage, polished shoes, made beds, and served white passengers with a smile. It was grueling, round-the-clock work, but the Pullman Company paid them next to nothing. Tips weren't a bonus, they were survival. Without tips, many porters would have starved. It was a system designed to keep these workers humble, dependent, and easily replaceable. The restaurant industry copied this motto with gusto. Newly freed Black men and women made up a huge portion of waitstaff, busboys, and kitchen hands in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Many restaurants paid them nothing at all, just the tips they could hustle from guests who often didn't tip generously, if at all. Think about the power imbalance. Customers could pay you, or not. Today, the people most likely to work for tips are still overwhelmingly women, people of color, and immigrants. In fact, about 70% of tipped workers are women. And while the smiling server might seem like a symbol of hospitality, the system underneath still echoes those early days. A loophole that lets employers pay less than minimum wage, pushing the risk onto workers. So how did working for tips get locked into federal policy for generations? That secret is next, and it's hiding in plain sight right on that pay stub. Before we dig deeper, if you've got tipping fatigue, take a second to smash that like button and drop a comment telling us the most ridiculous place you've ever been asked to tip. Now, let's continue with some dollar figures you won't believe. The legal loophole: how tipped wages work. If you've ever worked in a restaurant, you probably know this number by heart: $2.13. That's the federal tipped minimum wage, and it hasn't budged since 1991. More than 30 years frozen in place. How is that even legal? Here's the catch. Under U.S. law, employers can pay workers who earn tips as little as $2.13 an hour, as long as their tips make up the difference to reach the federal minimum wage, which is still just $7.25 an hour in 2026. On paper, it sounds simple. Tips should top up a server's paycheck to what they'd make at any other minimum wage job. But here's the reality. The system puts all the risk on the worker and none on the employer. Imagine being a server on a Tuesday night in a half-empty diner. It's dead. A couple tables, a few cups of coffee, maybe a $4 tip here and there, if you're lucky. If you don't make enough in tips to hit minimum wage, your boss is legally supposed to cover the gap. But does that always happen? Not even close. Stories of wage theft in the service industry are rampant. Shady managers who forget to make up the difference, or worse, who steal a slice of the tips for themselves. Servers who get punished if they don't share their tips. Hosts and managers who pocket a cut of the tip pool. Workers who get stiffed by customers and just have to absorb the loss. And then there's the dirty secret. Tips can fluctuate wildly depending on the customer's mood, the weather, the economy, or whether your section gets good tables. You can do everything right and still go home with nothing. The system is designed to make you work for someone else's generosity instead of a fair wage. Meanwhile, restaurant owners and the powerful National Restaurant Association, sometimes called the other NRA, have fought tooth and nail to keep the tipped minimum wage frozen in time. Every time there's a push to raise it, they claim it will destroy small businesses, kill jobs, and make dining out unaffordable. But here's the question: does it really keep your burger cheap? Or does it just protect profit margins at the top while forcing millions of workers to hustle just to get by? It's a legal loophole baked into federal law since the 1960s, and it's still holding workers hostage today, more than half a century later. So if tipping was always supposed to be a bonus, how did it become the paycheck? And what happens when modern tech, those sleek little digital screens, turns our generosity into a money machine for billion-dollar companies? The rise of guilt tipping: how big tech cashed in. Just when you thought tipping couldn't get any weirder, enter the age of digital guilt. 2 decades ago, tipping mostly happened at sit-down restaurants, for a pizza delivery, or at a bar. Fast forward to now, and suddenly everyone wants a tip. You grab a latte to go? Tip. Buy a donut? Tip. Pick up a pasta dish you ordered online? Tip. So what changed? 2 words: digital kiosks. Those spin-around tablets have rewired our brains and our wallets. You know the drill. You place your order, the cashier taps a few buttons, and then boom, the screen flips around. Those big buttons pop up: 15%, 20%, 25%, and sometimes more. There's also the dreaded no tip button too. But do you really want to tap that with the cashier standing right there and the people behind you in line watching? That's not an accident. It's designed to make you feel just uncomfortable enough to cough up some extra cash.
Come on, you, cough up a bucket, cheap bastard.
And then came the gig economy. Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart, all of them found a new way to lean on your guilt. They flipped the old tipping ritual upside down. Remember when you'd tip a taxi driver in cash at the end of the ride? Now, rideshare apps slide that decision into a push notification on your phone, or build it in at checkout before you've even seen how the service goes. But here's the kicker: your generous tip doesn't always go where you think it does. In 2019, DoorDash was caught using customers' tips to subsidize drivers' base pay instead of adding it on top. So your extra didn't really help the driver, it just saved the company money. After a public backlash, DoorDash changed the policy. But the trick exposed something bigger. The tip jar had been hijacked by Silicon Valley and turned into a hidden revenue stream. You think you're helping the worker, but sometimes you're really plugging holes in a billion-dollar company's payroll. Meanwhile, you, the customer, feel squeezed. Which brings us to the final twist: what happens when someone tries to break the tipping cycle altogether? Are Americans ready to ditch the tip, or are we hooked for life? The Pushback: no-tip restaurants and the culture clash. If tipping is so awkward, so unfair, and so obviously rigged, why don't we just get rid of it? Believe it or not, plenty of people have tried, and what happened next shows just how tangled tipping is in America's cultural DNA. Over the last decade, some bold chefs and restaurateurs have declared war on the tip jar. Their vision? Hospitality included. Pay your staff a real wage up front, bake the true cost of labor into the price of the food, and let diners breathe easy. No more mental math at the end of a meal. Sounds pretty good, right? And for a while, it was trendy. Danny Meyer, the founder of Shake Shack and a New York restaurant icon, famously banned tipping at his Union Square hospitality restaurants in 2015. He said it was about fairness, leveling the playing field for back-of-house workers like dishwashers and cooks who usually don't see a penny of tips, while giving servers predictable paychecks. Other hotspots in San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland jumped on board. Service Included popped up on menus all over. Instead of a blank tip line, your bill said, "Hospitality included, no tipping necessary." But reality hit hard. Some customers balked at the higher menu prices. Some servers, especially veterans who knew how to rake in big tips on good nights, started making less money overall. A few diners still left sneaky cash on the table, and restaurants that tried service fees instead of tips found themselves tangled in new legal headaches about how to split it up. By 2020, the no-tipping trend had fizzled at many places. Danny Meyer's restaurants quietly rolled it back, and others followed. Even when people say they hate tipping, they hate losing control even more. So where do we go from here? Can we change this system, or are we stuck with the world's most awkward financial handshake forever? What happens next? The future of tipping. So if tipping is so bad, so awkward, so obviously unfair, what's stopping us from changing it? Some states are already doing it. California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Alaska. These places have no separate tipped wage at all. Workers there get the full state minimum wage before tips. Their tips really are extra, a reward, a bonus, the way it was supposed to be. And guess what? Restaurants didn't crumble. Burgers didn't cost $50 overnight. Sure, menu prices are a bit higher, but workers get stability. They can count on a real paycheck that isn't hostage to a stranger's mood. Other states are pushing for the same. But the other NRA, the National Restaurant Association, spends millions fighting to keep the tipped wage loophole alive. Their talking point? Raising wages will kill small businesses, kill jobs, and drive prices through the roof. Meanwhile, the industry rakes in billions while leaving workers to chase your pocket change. And here's the biggest twist of all, one that's brand new. In July 2025, no tax on tips became federal law as part of a sweeping tax package.
The one big, beautiful bill.
For the first time ever, workers in tipped jobs can deduct up to $25,000 of their reported tips from their federal income taxes, at least through 2028. On the surface, it sounds like a massive win for servers, bartenders, and delivery drivers. Supporters say it finally puts more money back in workers' pockets. But dig into the fine print, and it gets complicated. Roughly a third of tipped workers already earn so little that they owe no federal income tax in the first place. So for them, the tax break changes almost nothing. It doesn't raise that frozen $2.13 wage. It doesn't stop tip theft or wage gaps. And critics warn it could actually entrench tipping even deeper into American life, turning a broken system into a tax-advantaged habit that's harder than ever to dismantle. Either way, more than 100 years after those anti-tipping societies, the tip is now written into the U.S. tax code, and the debate is the loudest it's been in a century. At the same time, younger generations are questioning the whole ritual. More gig workers are speaking up about tip theft and shady pay. More customers are asking why they're tipping for counter service or for pickup. The truth is, America is at a tipping point. Literally. Some states are ready to kill the loophole. Some restaurants want to build a fairer system. Some politicians want to bless the tip with a tax break. And some customers just want to pay what things really cost up front. But old habits die hard. The future of tipping is an open question. Will we keep playing along, or finally see the system for what it is, a loophole hiding in plain sight? So what do you think? Should tipping stay or go? Should that $2.13 wage finally be raised? Or is no tax on tips enough? Drop your answer in the comments, share your worst tipping horror story, and hit subscribe. Then stay right here for another deep dive BabbleTop video.